I mentioned in a recent video that I'm building my best friend's first over-the-top, like custom water-cooled high-end build that he's ever owned as long as I've known the guy, which has been like 16 years or something, so I'm a terrible friend. Anyway, I'm gonna be building his system, so we're gonna be using the NZXT H9 Flow. This is actually a sponsored case for this build. It's in white. I figured I'd take you guys along for the ride of some of the planning process when it comes to getting ready for a high-end rigid tube build. Because with so many options now and cases starting to take some really interesting turns in terms of not just being a rectangle with fans in the front and fans in the top, I'm gonna take you guys along for the ride today as I sort of plan this one out to give you guys some ideas on things you need to consider before you just start buying parts and potentially wasting money and having to deal with very expensive and timely returns and exchanges and stuff. Get amazing prices on the brands you love at Micro Center. Micro Center has over 30,000 items in stock, including desktops, laptops, computer components, monitors, TVs, and more. Not sure which parts to choose for your next build? Then use Micro Center's custom PC builder to find compatible parts, create your parts list, add them to your cart, and use same-day pickup at one of Micro Center's 25 locations nationwide. And if you're not comfortable building it, one of Micro Center's professional builders can build it for you as fast as same day for a fee. And if you need ideas for a build, then head to Micro Center's Build Showcase for great build inspiration, or submit your build for others to see. To see everything that Micro Center has to offer, click the link in the description below. All right, so this is the H9 Flow. It's a dual chamber type of case, very much a like a low 11, an 011 dynamic type of a shape, which has become very popular these days. You can see we got a glass front, we've got a motherboard, wall of fans right there. We've got availability for a 360 on the bottom and a 360 and potentially a 420 on top, it looks like here. But I need to get this open. What I think is interesting too is there's no frame right here. It's just glass to glass with a like 45-degree cut beveled edge, which is kind of nice. So some things we have to consider as we are preparing to build in this. Obviously you need to know what case you're building in because that's gonna determine everything. And if you're wondering what makes it the Flow, there you go. The back side is just one big giant box fan. It looks like an AC vent.
That AC vent right there.
So yeah, that's all it is. And then this should be able to come out like, boop. Jeez, now it's an AC filter. Okay, anyway, that's what makes it the Flow. Literally like unobstructed with the size of the holes. So NZXT took when people complained about their fine mesh of like not having enough airflow, they're like, fine, you want flow? Here's your goddamn flow. First and foremost, what kind of motherboard is it gonna support? So it looks like we got ATX, MATX, and ATX technically supported here. One of the motherboards that we've considered using here, we've had some issues with Asus in the recent past that made me go, I don't know if I want to use an Asus board. So I do have an MSI board on backup here, just in case. This is a very wide motherboard. You can see it has the 90-degree plugs on the side. So everything is designed to come straight out of the board. Because Asus in their infinite wisdom goes, let's take a board that's already super wide and make it even wider by having all the plugs stick out the side. So clearance becomes a significant issue in just about any case you try to use it in. So Asus made that decision easy for me. I don't have to use their thing no more, because look at that. So already now, this is one of those situations where if you just go, I want crazy high-end expensive blah, 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 it may or may not work where we want to put it. Now I do have other motherboards on hand, so fortunately I can now start plugging and playing different components in there to see how they're gonna fit, which is what's gonna make this video have some substance for you that might actually be important in terms of information, because most people cannot just start plugging and playing parts in there as they want. One of the other things we're gonna do though, potentially is might use the riser cable, or the riser kit. So they do have a vertical mount kit. It's kind of a universal, but they do have it, we could use it in here. My issue with that is if I use the vertical mount, and this is something you need to think about too, is how much space am I gonna lose on the bottom? Because if I lose a ton of space on the bottom, then I potentially have radiator issues here of being able to mount this and have a bottom rad and a top rad. Now this is gonna be a 13900K with an active backplate RTX 4090 Strix card. So there's gonna be a lot of heat making its way into this system. So if I was to mount that there, you can see how much room I have here, which would be enough for fans and a radiator. There's not a lot of metal here. So if you have a really heavy graphics card like we have here, over 5 pounds with the dual the dual water blocks, or the ABP blocks on there, it can bend that metal and then sag. I'd be able to come up with something that we could thread in there and maybe looks pretty, that could push down on the fan or something. Like Phil has a freaking circle game hand printed to hold up his graphics card, so we could come up with something there. Because there is a theme for this particular build that I'm trying to incorporate in all of this. My friend is a huge Mega Man fan. Because we're 80s kids and he and I are the same generation, I got this is actually pretty expensive. It's like $110 for this Mega Man. But it's a Designer Series X, it's a Mega Man figurine that I'm going to incorporate in this build. I wanted the PC to look like a Mega Man level, like he's fighting in here. And I was actually just playing Mega Man on an emulator, Mega Man 2, because you can play them on free online, to sort of get a little bit of inspiration on how I would want to do this build. But this is a pretty sick theme. Yes, I know in the past I was like, putting a figure in your PC is not a theme. It's not, it's still not. I'm gonna be trying to tie in the fluid and the tubes and the colors and all that sort of stuff to make it sort of a theme. But anyway, this is gonna be going in there somewhere. And one of the reasons too this is gonna help it's gonna allow me to be able to match the shades of blue in here as best as I can tell. Because like his legs look purple and his his feet boots look purple and his legs look gray to me, and I'm assuming that's not the color. Anyway, I can use this to sort of match the colors, like specifically here, even the art, to match the colors. So that's why we went with a white case. So already I know that this motherboard is not gonna fit in this case, which is kind of a blessing in disguise in a way, because this card wasn't gonna work natively in the slot with, is that gonna lengthwise fit? Barely, if I were to go normal. Anyway, lengthwise, this doesn't fit in the slot horizontal because it impacts the heatsink. That's like right above the PCI Express slot. So that's why I've got the vertical adapter. That way I'd be able to sort of mount it like this. This is gonna be sort of a complicated loop only because the layout is a little bit less traditional. So what I need to do now is I'm gonna go out into my shop. I'm gonna see what Z790 boards that I currently have to try and figure out how I'm gonna do this. So this is the Strix board. It's funny how it still has an AIO bracket on there. I know we use this for testing 13900K, but this will fit in there. See? That'll fit in there just fine. It doesn't have any LCD screens that'll get blocked if I go vertical mount. Because the problem with if I go vertical mount on that other board is the Extreme board has a screen right here. But as you see, if I go with how tall these modern cards are, if I go vertical now here, it would cover it up. And then what's the point of having that screen? But I do like this being kind of like a chunk of hardware right here. The downside with vertical mounting this is it removes access to anything on the PCI Express slots. So that would mean our M.2s and stuff. So I need to make sure I don't do what I did in one of my personal builds in the past, where I put it all together and turned it on and went to install Windows and realized I didn't have any drives installed. So then I had to drain the loop, take the tubes off, take the graphics card out, put it in drives. All right, so that works, but before I commit to the Strix, I'm gonna go ahead and put, it's funny, it's a lot less expensive motherboard than any of these, but it's the MSI MPG Edge. I'm gonna throw that in here real quick to see how that looks. It might be a little bit too stark to have the white board in here and then everything else being black around it. So I don't know yet. So technically it's not white as much as it's like gunmetal. So that's how that one looks in there. But look at the spacing we have now. So because of the space between this and this, I would be able to traditionally mount this in there horizontally, which actually leaves me a ton of room for stuff. I could even have Mega Man on top of the freaking graphics card. Because you know, there's lots of, in the game, there's lots of platforms that you have to jump from. So I'm gonna go ahead and mount the board down. It's funny, it's like Asus has really fallen in quality in terms of, like, their build quality is outstanding, but just things working and breaking, it's gotten worse over the years, and MSI has gotten better and better. And Gigabyte has also gotten better and better. 672 reviews on Amazon. Now, Amazon reviews, you know, as long as you find the verified sellers, 4.5 out of 5 out of 672. Now, Motherboard reviews, if you see anything above a 3, usually is good, because motherboard, people a lot of the times don't even know how to determine if a motherboard is a problem. So they'll go in and just trash a motherboard as a negative review and find out it was something else and then never correct the review. So this tells you a lot of people are not having out of the box issues with their systems and using this board, which is important to me. I'm feeling like this might be a good board to use because of the fact I won't have to use the vertical mount. If you want to know the truth. And it does make the loop order and stuff just make a whole lot more sense. All right, let me get the board mounted. The one thing I hate is their Dragon logo though. And we were talking about this, like we have a Cricut, I have my airbrushes, I could always do something with this. This is nothing, this is just there's nothing here. I might light up, I don't know. I just hate the Dragon logo, and I feel like MSI has always been too in your face with it. But what I wanna see now is I wanna check for sag. I'm curious as to whether or not, nice. I'm curious as to whether or not I'm gonna have to come up with some sort of a custom solution here. And the other thing I need to check for, obviously, is height of the graphics card. It shouldn't be a problem, but I need to make sure the door will go on, because the extra height of the graphics card plus the height of the terminal, I mean, that's a lot of extra height to deal with versus regular old graphics card. It's all crunchy sounding right now when I put it down. Oh boy. Oh, that's not gonna clear. That is a problem. Actually, oh man, I don't know.
We'll see.
First of all, when it comes to sagging, there's a little bit of sag, but there's some tricks I have that I've showed you guys that I can get that to not sag. Oh my God. It is touching. My concern is the fittings. Are the fittings gonna be wider than that? It's touching. So these are the EK torque fittings. These are the ones I used in my build, my last several builds actually. These are the fattest fittings on the market. I don't need to go with these fittings. I just love the way they look. I'm not even sure they make them in white, but I want to use white fittings. The reason why I'm using them is if these clear and don't hit anything, like as long as they don't stick out past right there, we're good. Oh my gosh, they're flush, which means these fittings also, and the reason why I'm doing this is it looks like these might even line up. No, I think they're just barely to the right of the socket. Because one of the things I'm thinking about doing with this loop is a parallel loop between the GPU and the CPU. Doesn't matter. If it doesn't close, then it doesn't matter. So let's see, I think it's gonna close. It looks like it's perfectly flush with it. Oh, do you see it move when it pops closed? No, what it is with it sagging, that thing is not perfectly flat. So the glass is pushing it flat. Look, watch it move. See? See the card moving as I push the glass? But I have to make an informed decision. So I need to now do the vertical mount to see how that lines up and looks. Because I think it would be neat to have Mega Man on top of the graphics card or hanging from the graphics card and do. Like I'm gonna put the shooting thingies on there, and I think it'd be neat if I somehow illuminated it. I personally feel like this vertical mount adapter in here is going to make it look gaudy. You know what I do like about this case though, is it doesn't have the little divider, the little pieces of metal between each one of these, which is nice, because then when you put your graphics card in, sometimes they're like really close to where the adapters are. And depending on how fat your plug is for like your DVI, or not your DVI, jeez, your DisplayPort or your HDMI, it might hit it and sometimes not go in all the way. So then you think something's wrong with your graphics card and all it was your plug wasn't in all the way. This alleviates that from being an issue. Okay, so the vertical mount adapter's in there. It seems fairly sturdy, but this will be the judge of that. Yeah, I think it would definitely need some more anti-sag work there. I don't like how close this is to the CPU block, which means there's not gonna be any neat way of getting that in there. Okay, what's in there? There's obviously lots of room. There's a tiny bit of sag. Like, look, it's flexing the whole back of the case. Look at the back of the case. That's where it's flexing, is the case. We then have an issue now with like plugs and being all weird, and I don't like that. So I think having it literally touch the glass is it's like if the case was just a millimeter bigger. Just the proximity of this to the CPU already makes it super awkward. So I would have had to have gone like back here. I'm gonna be using one of those EK reservoir slash pump combos. So basically it's just designed to go where fans go, and you can get it in all the way up to like a 560, I think, something giant. But I'm gonna do a 360 one here. It's acrylic and it's got the pump built in and it's got my ports and fittings and stuff on there. I'm just gonna go with that. I would have to go like from here to the rad, and then from the rad like to the GPU, and then maybe out of the GPU to like up here or something. Like I don't even, because the thing is, I think with the way that this is in series, if I wanted to go in here and out here, because it's not parallel, I'd have to link the two ends together. Okay, so I just looked online. It says it does support the new direct link, which is this thing, can be set up in both parallel and serial. So I'm gonna be more than likely doing a parallel loop with the GPU and the CPU if I can get it to make sense. And the reason why I say that is the 13900K and the 4090 are gonna be putting a lot of heat into the loop. A single 360 or even a 420 up top is not going to be enough heat dissipation to keep the components nice and cool like I want them. Corsair brings gaming to the next level with the Xeneon 45-inch flexible OLED Xeneon Flex display. With up to 240 Hz refresh rate, 0.03 millisecond gray-to-gray response time, motion blur canceling, anti-reflective coating, burn-in protection, and customizable bend based on user's preference, the Xeneon Flex from Corsair allows gamers to truly tailor their display to their liking. Click the link below for more details. I know it's gonna be a component here, 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 and here. So ideally it would make sense if I was able to, I guess everything going in series would be just fine, because if I was to go in, let's say this side here, parallel tubes out of here, going into the CPU block, and then out here. And by the way, if you're not familiar with how parallel loops run and you're looking at this going, that'll just bypass. No, that's not how it works. Fluid dynamics does not work that way. There's lots of videos about this, my own included. It means I have everything nice and neat on this side, but I still have to get from here to here. So it would probably still make sense to go out into the rad. And I might even look at doing crossflow rads. Crossflow rads, so there's double pass and crossflow. Double pass is where the fitting's on the same side. So that means it goes in one side, goes to the other side of the radiator, makes a bend, goes down the other half of the rad, and then out the side. So it's not one big reservoir. It's if you took that rad and sliced it down the middle and folded it open, that's the radiator surface area. It's basically like, it's not 120, it's 60 by 240 is basically like what a 120 rad would be, or whatever double the length is. So if it's a 360, it'd be 2 times that by 60 millimeters if it's a 120 fan. So crossflow would be inlet on one side, outlet on the other, and it basically fills the entire radiator and flows all the way across and then exits the other side. I've done testing thinking that crossflow would not cool as well as double pass because of the fact that it's spending less time in the radiator. However, that didn't hold true. When I did a direct comparison with the same heat load on both a 240 crossflow and a double pass, they were exactly the same temperatures no matter what. Also, the nice thing about a crossflow is there's less pressure reduction across it. Or I say reduction, yeah, technically, because the longer, skinnier radiator is actually a smaller passageway through all those rows inside the rad that the fluid has to go through. So with all of those open, it's just having like more lanes on a highway, just like PCIe lanes, only it's fluid. So there was less pressure drop, which is good if you have lots of components. So I might see what type of crossflow rads are available to me. I know AlphaCool makes them. And guess what? The AlphaCool logo being blue for the first time wouldn't be out of place in a build for me. But I would probably paint it white anyway. So anyway, moving on. If I do a crossflow here and a crossflow up here, it basically eliminates and alleviates in the same word. It alleviates the need of having a tube go across. Bad, but I'm still gonna have to come up with some sort of an anti-sag. I've showed in the past before how a lot of the times it's sagging back here, and I can show you that. So a lot of the times it's sagging right here. And what I've actually found works really well is I'll take a piece of filament from like 3D printer, heat it, stretch it like a stretch sprue, shove it in there. This is what I did in my build, by the way. This is how I got my graphics card to stop sagging in my build. Shove it in there, snip it off, and then it can't go up. In fact, I'll just do it now to demonstrate. So this is the before. You can see it's definitely sagging. All this movement, by the way, and you can even hear it clicking the metal, listen. It's just because those brackets, like where these tabs on the graphics card, this little like nub, where that goes into the case, they have to account for all the different variants and sizes of backplate, the plate brackets for the graphics cards. So oftentimes they're a little oversized, which allows some play. So we're mounted here where the screws are, and we're mounted where the motherboard is, which gives us this third contact point to have a little bit of pivot. And any movement back there, whether it be a millimeter, translates to a lot more than that on the far end. Oh yeah, look at that. See that? Just shoved a zip tie in there. Now look at that, it's level. It's like the easiest anti-sag ever. And look at that. I can go up with it because I'm relieving that pressure, but I can't go down with it. So that's the thing I love about just looking at a problem and going, we don't need cables hanging like the leash from EVGA. We don't need circle gang hands holding stuff. Just sometimes all you need to do is just shove an object in a hole. J2023. Okay, so loop order, like I've said, I think series makes the most sense. So it's technically gonna go outlet into rad, whether it goes into rad here and outer rad there, or tubes. Sometimes I might just do the tubes because this is his first custom water-cooled build. He's had AIOs and stuff. He's never had a custom build like this. So having more tubes and stuff everywhere would be cool for him because he's never seen it before. Although I did recently deal with my very first time ever in the history of building computers, a tube pop off entirely while the system was on. So story time. So I was laying in bed and I just knock on my door. Come in. My daughter goes, Dad? And my oldest daughter, I said, yeah. She goes, there's green liquid on my desk. And I was like, how much? She's like, kind of a lot. I'm like, okay. And I was thinking maybe a drip somewhere. No, it was like lake green. It was just like Lake Mead, okay? It was just a green lake all over her desk. I'm like, whoa, what the heck? She left it on. So I immediately reached back and I turned off the power supply button. And I'm like, what the heck? And her reservoir was like, and came down and stopped. And I'm like, okay, that's weird. So then I turned it on and I saw drip, drip, drip from, remember she has a 011 with the distro plate. And so I saw drip, drip, and I was like, oh, one of those must have come loose. And so I took off her side panel with it on and I went to tighten it and it went everywhere. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So over time, it had just started sliding itself out. And that's what sucks about certain fittings. Now she was using the revolver fittings from Primo Chill, which I have used in all of my Skunkworks builds. I have never had one back out on me like that. So what I ended up doing, no, I take that back, I lied. I remember now. She's using the Alpha Cool fittings that I would use on the metal tubes because of the fact that it had that clamp, that brass clamp that would bite, and it would allow those chrome tubes to not slide off. Well, I guess I just didn't tighten them enough. And remember, I've said this a million times, as systems will fluctuate in temperature, hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold, those fittings can work their way loose because of the fact that they're also contraction and expanding and they have the O-rings in there. So that allows them to just kind of over time start to really slowly back off. It's a weird, I don't want to say phenomenon, it's just physics. But I've always said this before, anytime you build a water-cooled system, heat cycle it a few times and keep cranking on your fittings because you'll notice they start getting loose. Well, it's been 2 years since I built that system for her. And they had just loosened up to the point to where not only was the cap basically coming off, the fitting was loose too. So I went through and had to tighten up all of them. But I got to thinking about it. She's one of those people that consistently, they have a den where both my kids have their computers, their computer room, and they constantly game with the doors shut because they're so loud. That room gets hot. That means the system gets hot. Even with water cooled, it still gets hot. So hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold, it just finally let go. So I went through and had to tighten all of those up. Fortunately, no damage to the system at all. Unfortunately, her white desk, because it's laminated, on the end got some water damage because it sort of sucked it up as it got under the laminate and sucked it up. That's the worst that happened. That is extremely fortunate. She has a 3080 in there. She could have lost the 3080 or the whole system because it squirted everywhere. That's the only time I've ever had a tube catastrophically pop off a system. And part of it's my fault because I keep tabs on my systems, but I haven't really kept up on hers. So anyway, moving on, the order is gonna go out of here into the rad, out of the rad into the block, out of the block into the other block, out of there, technically is what's happening. It's 2 blocks that's in series. The reason why I mention that is this is resistance. So in series, there's gonna be a pressure drop every time it enters and leaves a component. So the overall pressure is gonna be determined by how many resistance items there are, and then that'll be your end pressure. That's why I like using D5 pumps, because they've got high flow and good pressure. DDC pumps will have very high pressure but less flow because they're much smaller impeller. So just one way, half dozen the other. The D5 is also quieter. Out of here into the CPU, out of the CPU into the rad, out of the rad into the top there. So the loop will all be contained right here. What I want to do now is I want to kind of get an idea of what the figurine is going to look like in here. He's just like, yeah.
It looks like a drunk man, dude. Like Mega Man had too much blood, and he's just
ha ha ha, pew pew. So there's an example of a pose like that. I went in there, or even like back here or something like that. So I feel like now I should look and see if they have any of the other bad guys. So I can have one over here. Literally like there's a little fight scene happening there. We were thinking like it'd be neat with the tubing, like if it was run in such a way that he could literally be like hanging on the tube, or he has like his foot on the tube, or it's just, anyway, sorry. I'll be playing with this all day long probably now. And I think that's where we're gonna end today's video, because I had to just overall see what main components were gonna fit in here. I was shocked that I thought for sure that there was gonna be plenty of room, being as wide as this case is, to not have to deal with this being a problem. Man, did that barely fit. It fits good enough. Hopefully this video gave you guys some things to think about. It also gave me an opportunity to sort of start figuring out what parts I need to order right now for fittings and whatnot to get it all working. I'm gonna be using the frosted tubing with blue coolant in there. I'll be accenting this really with blue lighting and stuff. You'd be surprised how much you can pull a theme together just with RGB, as much as people hate RGB. Again, you don't hate RGB, you hate the marketing behind RGB, okay? But it allowed me to really tie some things in, because if I do individual lighting control, I'd be able to have it be all blue over here by Mega Man, but like red over here by the bad guy. Just kind of endless on what we can do. I'm really excited about this one. All right, guys, thanks for watching. If you have any ideas on what we could do specifically to sort of tie in the Mega Man theme, I've got time. So put it down in the comments below, and maybe your idea makes it into the build. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Ooh, and if I had the RAM doing all blinky stuff, it'd be like a game.